So how about you, Tuhon Stevie?
Well, I mean, pretty similar. I mean, I started martial arts at a young age. You know, growing up, and you kind of always had to have a crew of people around you. If you didn't want to get jumped or anything, being bullied. You know, not really fitting in with certain crowds because I was biracial, so didn't really fit in with the black crowd. Didn't really fit in with the white crowd. You know, so I had to blaze my own path. It wasn't until I started doing martial arts that, like, my martial arts brothers became my brothers. You know, started originally with boxing, wrestling, taekwondo, and my first, what I consider an official system, was Wing Chun Kung Fu. You know, that was the first what I consider official because I actually, you know, went to an academy to learn that. You know, I wasn't doing it at the boys club and stuff like that. And started hitting that pretty heavy, and then, you know, it was a Muay Thai school, you know, and they were pretty influential on making sure that you're always with the crew. So we went with the crew everywhere, pretty much, you know. From then on, I just branched out into some other forms of kung fu, like Wallum Kung Fu, praying mantis, Southern praying mantis. Did a lot of kickboxing, taekwondo, and started running into a lot, you know, getting into some scraps here and there, and really, you know, sparring with a lot of my friends and trying to figure it out. And I would always try a lot of my stuff, man. And over the years, as I progressed, I moved to the Wallum Kung Fu Temple in Orlando. I'd also met Sifu Francis Fong before I left and got the invite for Wallum Temple. So did some Muay Thai, some Wing Chun, and Sifu Fong invited me and a good friend of mine to move down to Georgia to train. But I already had a previous commitment with Wallum, so I moved down there to check out the temple. Lived down there for about 2 years. Just had a lot of issues with a lot of systems that I encountered. I did Chorley Foot, Hung Gar, ran the gamut on Wushu and a lot of Chinese martial arts. But when it would come to the fight, I'm like, there's nothing lining up, nothing matching up. I always end up getting a fight and I always end up either boxing the guy or wrestling with the guy, you know. So after running that down there, I said, man, I got, you know. So called my boys, moved up to Atlanta, started doing Muay Thai and Wing Chun heavy, you know. And then from there, you know, trying to make money, ended up bouncing in clubs, you know, working security, getting into scraps, you know, collecting money here and there, you know. I don't know, in the progression of looking for reality, I ended up becoming a police officer for City of Atlanta Police Department. Ended up working, you know, the 1996 Olympics, getting into some crazy shit. I was down there during the bombing, locking up the World Trade Center, like I'm not in the World Trade Center, but the World Crime Center for the news and everything. Getting into some stuff, working Freaknik and all that stuff, you know. And functionally realizing, you know, once a person gets past a straight blast or a Muay Thai clinch, you know, doing kicks and stuff like that, you end up on the ground and stuff.
Yeah, so when was the first time you actually saw, like, Tom crawling them?
Well, we called them and set up the training, and I remember them discussing how it was going to go. So Tuhon Bong came down because Tuhon Carl was going to Connecticut. So Tuhon Bong came down, and we were doing sessions with him, and I remember right off the rip, it was different. You know, we started doing footwork, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then right into it, went to live machetes, you know. And he's like, okay, here's what I want you to do. You're gonna swing at me, try to hit me, and these are some of our moves that we use. And you know, I was like, okay. I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting, you know. So we swung at him, trying to hit him, and man, couldn't touch him, you know. I was like, wow. And so then we started working a lot of isolations and stuff, and we were doing live machetes, you know. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, it was almost dusk. We're out there for hours, and sparks are flying, and we're cutting. I'm like, man, I was like, man, this is, you know, not only was it the techniques, but it was the mindset. Like everything attached to it, you know, was completely a missing gap in all the other martial arts systems that I trained, you know. The reality of it, you know.
What was that? What year around? What was that? 2003,
2003.
Right.
You know.
So I think a year after the brothers came out in public.
Yeah.
2002.
Yeah, and I remember, you know, Tuhon Ball was coming down several times a year, you know, and we would do like extended weekend sessions and stuff. Supposed to be like 3-hour sessions, and they were usually like 14-hour sessions. We're up all day and night outside, you know, training, you know, and you know, it was awesome. And at that time, you had mentioned that you guys were formulating evolutions and stuff like that, you know. This was like before the evolution training and all that stuff.
Yeah, back then, like 2002. I mean, we're straight out just
fighting
people, or like running like application stuff. Like, you know, somebody's trying to hit you. What do you do with that? You know, countering.
Yeah.
You know,
and you know, I don't think I ever told Tuhon or you guys this, but like it was probably within that year that I trained with them. You know, I was bouncing at a couple clubs and stuff, and the mass attack scenarios that came across ended up exactly replicating in the parking lot some of the scenarios. You know, there was some mass attack scenarios that we were working on Matt Wood's back porch, you know. And like Tuhon Bong left, and then like that opposite weekend, I got into a massive mass parking lot fight. And all the footwork, all the angling, they had, like, there was a bunch of Latinos, they had chains, guns, you know, knives. Like we pushed them out. And at that time, there was only two bouncers at this particular club that I was working at. It ended up being like 18 people in the parking lot, you know. And we were just running, decking guys, like guys going to their car to try to get their guns. The chains come out, you know. And all I remember is the stalker drill and body shielding, and saved me, man, you know. So, and after that, I mean, after angling, funneling, pushing guys into the cars, got in, and just like what we were talking about with the doorway and the wedging, got in between two cars that were parked, and just like guys were massing up, and I'm just like stabbing, hitting them, boom, boom, you know. They couldn't even get over each other, you know. And, you know, at that time, you know, first shot rings out, everybody starts to clear, like scatters. It was weird. It was a weird situation at the time. On my way home, I was like, man, if I hadn't done that mass attack training the weekend before, who knows what would happen? Because like the other bouncer didn't have any weapons, and the only reason the parking lot got cleared was because it was an interesting thing, you know. And then I remember getting an invite that they were hosting their first training on the mountain, you know. And you know, I was sold myself, but I just thought that the brothers were probably just phenomenal, you know, as far as just gifted guys, you know. And I hadn't met Tuhon Carl at the time, in person yet, you know. But when I got to the mountain, and, you know, it was interesting. We got up here, and everybody, you know, they were sparring and moving around, and I was like, at that point, I was sold, because everybody that was up here they were all able to spar, all able to move, and it looked exactly like what we were training, you know. Nothing different, no hand up, running, doing all that crazy stuff with the weapon, you know. And I was like, okay, this is a scientific system, because everybody is trying to replicate, and it's working, you know. So, but like when we first started training and stuff, it's like, wow, this addressed a lot of questions and a lot of problems that I had. But not only that, just like you were saying, like some of the psychic influence as well, is like the mindset training, you know,
right?
And other drills, you know, directly, you know, a lot of, like, I've taught a long time, and there are a lot of schools out there, and like the majority of the people come in, they go on the mat, or their tie shorts on, in their boxing gloves. And then at the end of the session, they get dressed, they walk out, and they leave their skill at the door, because they're not ready for it.
Right. Yeah. So which is contrast to what we were doing. Like, you're literally walking in the door with what you had on. You're training with, a safer version of it, but it's the same thing that you're doing outside the door. And when you walk out, you're just walking back out from the training. That's it. Like, like we're still like aware of like our surroundings, we're aware of like what's happening down the block, and then we're still like we're still able to access, our tools.
Right.
Right.
And that's the thing, like too, like developing bad habits, because like people don't address the problematic stuff that martial arts put out there. I've unfortunately had students that died, from unrealistic training. Even me bouncing, doing standard jiu-jitsu, always doing back crunches for takedowns to land into a mount, but you're doing that on mats. For one example, I was bouncing in a club in Atlanta and got into a massive brawl with a bunch of guys. Haymaker comes, cover, lock up with the guy. As soon as I lock up with him, I immediately, because I've been training for 2 hours that day in class doing takedowns, immediately went for the back crunch. But as I'm going for the back crunch, a mob of guys are getting pushed back towards me. And as I'm riding the guy, I'm falling down. The guy's hugging me, right to the mount with my boots on concrete, and a bunch of people fall on my back. I basically blew both my knees out in the middle of the fight. Had to have them redone. Didn't walk for about 1.5 years. Luckily, when I landed on the guy and rolled over, I passed my leg over, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, man, my leg's not supposed to move like that. But passed over in front of, broke the guy's arm, and then my brother Troy had my back. They were all like stomping, the whole thing. We got him up, got him out, and all that stuff. And I'm still laying down. I remember trying to stand up, and my legs folded up underneath me, and I was like, wow, I could have been killed from that. I could have died from just using the wrong technique. Instead of like no concept of body shielding at that time. Could have circled to the guy's back, pulled him out the back door, but like none of that stuff ran through just because of training scars. And that's the thing. As soon as you lock up with a person, you're stuck with that person in a mass attack scenario. Unless you're angling them and moving them and using them as a body shield, you're stuck. You're planted. You're gonna get overrun. I've never really fought or experienced combat. They're constantly seeking, and they always want the new thing, not the most effective or efficient thing or the simplest thing. They're hypnotized by movies. And,
wow.
And like the majority of people that have never really fought, and I'm not talking about you, because you have different types of fights. You have fighting when you're fighting a drunk uncle in the backyard. That's fair enough. You're not really trying to kill him. You can choke him out. You can wrestle with him. You can punch. But then you get into situations where you're fighting. You got competition where you're fighting. You got guys that get ready. And you got guys that get ready for those competitions, and they got 6 months to get ready. But then you got guys that are bouncers, law enforcement. Like people don't understand. You've got to fall back with different stuff, because I've been in situations where I've been in like 10 fights in one night, and you got to stand in post. You got to stay there, and those guys could come back. You got to be ready for that. You might break your hand in one fight, and you still got to work and be there and maintain it. So then you got to go to the next technique, because you can't grab anymore. So you got to go to your elbows. You got to go to your headbutts. Right. You got to go to your chokes. Oh, the guy's bigger. So you're constantly running through a game, but a lot of people, they aren't used to that level of violence, or they've never seen that level of violence other than a movie. They sit back and they watch movies, and they think, for a big thing, it's like sparring is not fighting. People think that sparring is fighting. Sparring helps to replicate speed and timing and distance, but it's still not fighting. And nowhere in it does it replicate the realistic drive of footwork and other people coming at you. So I think people get lost in that, and especially martial artists, not combatants, guys that are running schools and they're doing all these programs. And unfortunately, they're doing the public a disservice, because they think that they're teaching people. And these students think that they're actually learning something that's going to prepare them for reality, and it's not. you know. And that was the draw and the mainstay of why I stuck with the system, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you totally. Like, I remember even after I reached a certain level with Tuhon Carl, and this is much earlier on, Tuhon Carl, you know, back then was like, yeah, you should go see other systems, check out other systems. Like, you know, there's, you know, you're not tied down to us. You just go try out other systems. And, you know, they recommended a couple. I went to check them out, and, you know, I did my due diligence. But at the end of the day, you know, I came back, and why? Because, I mean, this is something that I was always seeing, seeing on the street, or I was seeing other people bring it back to me. You know, the great part about what we do is that we pull from the experiences of our group, right? And our group is very experienced, right? And some, you know, and when we're talking to high ranks, you know, they've seen it, they've seen it, they've done it, right? And not always on